Welcome to the Christopher Peter Review, your source of common sense commentary on salient current events. There is no perfect political party in the United States of America. Republicans are generally good for the economy, national security, and affordable energy. Democrats are generally adept at trying to ensure no one gets left behind if at all possible. But each has their blind spots. Republicans may ignore the need for some level of government intervention to protect the most vulnerable in society. Democrats all too often think the worst of everyone and amplify the ills caused by the fringe to empower those deemed elite. The importance is that both parties must work for the people, and the side that forgets typically sees political waves that change the political landscape of the moment. In 2008, Democrats connected with Americans. 2016 brought a voice to the voiceless. Last month, Americans rejected the progressive political cultures that are causing real harm to our society. So without any further delay on my part, let us begin our discussion of the current state of our society by looking at the state of our two leading political parties. There are highs and lows, and right now Democrats are experiencing a major low right now. The recent election cycle was a disaster for America's Progressive Party. Based on the data, the party is far disconnected with the American public, which led to a clear and decisive rejection of two presidential candidates in one cycle. They were the incumbent party with a plethora of campaign cash at their disposal. Now they are the clear minority party and come out of the presidential election with a significant debt despite having a record war chest to run with, showing donors and the broader public they are not trustworthy on fiscal matters. The narrative and reality at this point of the party is that they are dysfunctional, disconnected with the American people, and their policies and ideas are what created the issues and problems that Americans experience every day when they work, buy groceries, live their lives, and operate in their communities. And worse yet, Democrats cannot be trusted because they lie too much too often. The whole campaign cycle was spent trying to paint President-elect Donald Trump as a derogatory name in the book. Yet, the people flock to him. Rather than acknowledge that there is a trust gap, you double down and try to continue to maintain the fabricated narrative. You also were the party that said the zombie we saw in June, before that, and since was in full capacity. Ironically, he only appeared like that during his meeting with Trump. You generally will struggle to win elections if all you plan to do is try to distort your opponent and fabricate narratives around them. Candidates must offer something of value. You may not appease everyone, but you must give people something to consider. Democrats have not done that since Barack Obama first ran, and clearly his influence is completely gone. The Obama brand is low, the Clinton brand is low, and the Democrat brand is real low right now. People rightfully associate the rising crime with their push to reduce investments in law enforcement and essentially eliminate patrols. Associate the illegal immigration issues with them relaxing the border policies that were working. Associate the problem of inflation with their economic policies and energy agenda. In the past, the Republicans faced a period where many in the media questioned whether they could ever be the majority party again. The Obama years were largely fruitless for them in many ways. Rather than blaming the American people, they moved further towards the people. While many missed it, the Republicans grew their coalition by embracing Americans being American rather than trying to fit the manufactured and manicured narrative being crafted by autocrats. Rather than trying to prosecute people for viewing a person with a penis a male because that individual fantasizes about being a woman, focus on the issue that matters to the broadest group. There is a need to ensure that all Americans feel welcomed, but you cannot elevate people by trying to marginalize others. There is a need to protect others without losing perspective. It is easy to project blame and responsibility to broadest segments of society and distort the moments that are viewed as contributing factors. But the reality is that our society needs to move forward in a united and fair manner. We cannot do that when we do not see each other as equal or view others as part of the problem or more responsible for pushing society forward than others. In America, we all bear the burden to find our own path to success. It is no one else's responsibility to give us what we need and want. It does not matter where we start from. We have to find our way forward. The opportunity available is generally unbiased. It only sees value creation, ingenuity, and productivity. The American electorate was clear, decisive, and unapologetic in their response. The status quo of economic stagnation combined with high costs to consumers and producers, high crime throughout our major cities and communities across the nation, uncontrolled illegal immigration, and global chaos was no longer acceptable. And the party they associated all these ills with is the Democrat Party, as the Democrat strongholds are the staging grounds for all these ills that Americans were growing tired of experiencing. All the while they were being told that it was all in their minds and the situations that they were seeing, living in, and working through were not real. I found it interesting how many Democrats starting on November 6th woke up a bit and changed their tunes. Maybe they should have focused more on inflation, border security, and the host of the other issues rather than obsessing over pronouns and prosecuting people for misgendering people who were misgendering themselves. Interesting to see the slew of progressive liberal pundits who had to publicly acknowledge they were wrong and needed to change to align better with the broader American public. But of course, there are some that will just simply dig in deeper and entrench themselves around ideals that real mainstream Americans rejects. That is the interesting lie that progressives tell themselves, that the whole world agrees with them, when in reality, they exist in these echo chambers that just reaffirm their views like a cult. Any idea, fact, or evidence that shows they might not be on the right side of the argument or that they view is not functional is rejected as a conspiracy or rhetoric of some form of a denier. The problem with ideologues is that they see the world not just with their rose-colored glasses but their labels of convenience. Many cannot function if they cannot deal with day-to-day realities. They must compartmentalize using their labels, while the rest of us experience things, realize whether it is right, wrong, or just different, and just try to go on with our daily lives. I have said in the past that you do not have to always like what voters tell you, but to some degree you have to accept it and find ways to adapt. But that is not what some people are doing in the midst of the recent disaster that is the current Democratic Party. Some are choosing to entrench themselves in the closed-minded thinking that led to the exact outcome they dreaded. California Governor Gavin Newsom seems to be leading the brigade of Democrat governors, many of whom will lose re-election because of this, who will seek to make their states Trump-proof. Many of these blue states saw growth in the popularity of Trump in their states, so they are rejecting the voices and will of the people in favor of their autocratic views and leadership. There is what politicians say and what they do that matters. The combination is important. If you say one thing and do another, then voters will not trust you. If you claim to be a defender of democracy and continue to ignore the will of the people, then you are an autocrat. Saying you hear their concerns and actually hearing their concerns are two different things. Essentially, Democrat governors are going to attempt to make their states even more safe havens for crime, sanctuaries for illegal immigration and the crimes that come with it, and dens for economic stagnation that has driven many mainstream productive Americans to red states. Does Gavin Newsom forget that his own state recalled him, or does he view that as a right-wing conspiracy? Does New York Governor Kathy Hochul and New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy not see that their states are more red than before? Does Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro not see that Republicans are growing faster than Democrats in his state? Not saying these three are on board with the radical idea of entrenching in the failed progressive ideology, but Democrats need to wake up. They ignored the real issues Americans faced and it cost them dearly. The party continues to double down on failure. The Republicans are not going to be foolish as they were in the past. You cannot bank on that. The real path forward for Democrats would be to move closer to the center. Blaming the voters and trying to guilt them back into the fold will not work. They see you for who you are at this point. Now, you have to show them some growth or change. Hard to do if all you do is project blame outward and externalize responsibility. The single biggest reason for Democrats to worry about their ability to rebound from the current state of disaster for the party is the person they tried to force Americans to vote for. The person that they created a convenient storyline for. The person they propped up with a slew of narratives of achievements, quick wit, and bold leadership. The problem was that person could not play the part and was clearly unable to act like he could when all of America saw who he truly was. The whole storyline came crashing down in June and ended a fruitless political career that lasted half a century. More importantly, it showed Americans that without a shadow of a doubt they were being lied to. While Kamala Harris was a bad candidate and had many political flaws, the major contributor to their situation was the Biden record that was an anchor to anyone who would have stepped into that spot. One that she foolishly did not distance herself from when given more than ample opportunity. And worse yet, she too was part of the deception surrounding Biden. Once you knew that Joe Biden was lying. Many of us knew the narrative was a lie, but once it was out in the open, it was hard to accept anyone who carried out the lie. Especially when they told you he was sharp and quick-witted one day and then accepted his place on the ballot the next. The combination of being deceptive and opportunistic are not qualities people generally find appealing. So now that without a shadow of a doubt of the American public being deceived by Biden, the Democrats, and his stable of enablers, Joe Biden no longer seems to feel the need to hide who he truly is. That is what he showed us when he pardoned his son, when he lectured the world that no one is above the law and he would not place his son above the law either. Joe Biden lying is nothing new. But it is another layer of distrust for Democrats. If a Democrat is talking, they are lying lately. They will do what is in their interests and expect Americans to simply accept it. All politicians are opportunistic and operate in their own self-interest, but Democrats want you to view them as noble in doing so. Let us not fall for the narrative. Joe Biden did not pardon his son because of an over-aggressive Department of Justice. From all accounts, it seemed like the Justice Department was doing all it could to give a soft landing to Hunter Biden. A broad sweetheart plea deal that a federal judge had to reject. He was treated with kid gloves. I am not sympathetic to the notion of a father's love, because a good father does not completely shield their children from the continued consequences of their actions and choices, and certainly does not allow them free rein to roam the White House even when indicted and under federal investigation. How much love did Joe Biden show his own granddaughter that Hunter was denying? Usually grandparents love grandkids more than their own children. The pardon really acknowledges to the public that Hunter Biden is who people accuse him of being and that Joe Biden is probably who his detractors claim him to be as well. Seems all too convenient the scope of the pardon with the timelines of the Ukraine dealings. By pardoning Hunter, was he pardoning himself? Something Democrats scoffed at when Trump broached the subject? Yet, we are seeing it right before our eyes. The new precedent is one we do not need, and it is one more reason to view 2020 as the big blunder and a stain on our voting record as a society. There is no denying now that the Republican Party is now the party of Donald Trump. America is clearly embracing the MAGA agenda and the former president in a manner not experienced in 2016 or 2020. To Trump's credit, he brought in many new people into the fold and expanded efforts to attract minority voters to join his movement. While some wanted a Trump takeover to seem like a bad thing, it appears that it is only bad for establishment politicians who ignored the people for too long. The Republican has never been this energized in a long time. For the first time, Republicans are again feeling like the majority party, successfully reducing the registration gaps that existed for some time. To Trump's credit, he engaged voters of all walks of life rather than courting the typical Republican voter, like many Republicans mistakenly did in the past. Many spoke about the need for growing the party. Trump actually did. He brought so many new voters into the fold and connected with a host of people dissatisfied with the status quo. Many voter groups that were once reliable Democrat voters crossed over to the Trump column, showing that if you make a reasoned argument and actually show up, people are open to at least considering your candidacy. As Trump said in 2016, what is the harm in engaging new areas where Republicans usually cede to their opponents? At the very least they see that you are willing to engage with them. When is the last time you saw a Republican presidential candidate campaigning in New York City, not at some Wall Street function? Holding rallies at MSG and a host of other traditionally blue areas had so many people scratching their heads. But it worked to at the very least reduce the blue vote. Trump set a foundation that hopefully his party can continue. Give people a new choice. Too many places in America have only one set of choices. Republicans need to engage with people that are not normally Republicans but share their principles. There are more conservatives and center-rights than liberals, progressives, and moderates. They just need to be able to connect and engage to continue the growth. Many conservative minorities need to be given a choice and shown that Republicans value their vote and their contributions to our society. Trump set a perfect example of how Republicans can thrive in the future. He changed the political environment and the traditional rulebook. Hopefully, Republicans do not return to the politics of old. Republican ideas are marketable across the nation to people of all backgrounds. All people want to experience economic freedom, income mobility, entrepreneurship, freedom, and self-reliance. All people want to live in safe communities, raise children with proper values, and practice their faith without being harassed by the fringe. Democrats are not willing to match this. The only counter-argument they ever offer is Republicans are mean. I will take an effective mean person over a softer person who only advances their own interests and sees people as useful sheep. Trump has set the table for the future, and if he can deliver, all Americans will benefit like they did during the first term. The focus should be building the pipeline for the next generation to carry the mantle. For quite some time, the Republican Party was stereotyped as the party of the rich, the party of the affluent white American. Narratives like John Edwards' To America's speech connected with those who really did not align with traditional Republican views. Many Republican leaders are viewed as being Republican in name only. They ran on conservative principles, yet they govern in the same manner as Democrats. The only difference was that they wanted the government to focus on their interests rather than ones championed by Democrats, but the end impact was the same on the voters. So the voters really did not have a real choice. There was no one really wanting to address the issues they faced, only if it helped solidify their power and influence. The difference is that Trump is independently wealthy and knows how to generate wealth. He is not in office to build a cushy politics position or speaking tour. There is less likely a chance that he would be able to be influenced by those who continually seek economic benefit through the coercive hand of the federal government. Also, Republicans struggled mightily to break out of the Democrat media machine that projected fabricated attributes on them and narratives around the policies and ideas. Democrats were far more adept at finding ways to control the prevailing opinion, use ties with media and Hollywood to influence what society thought and accepted. Trump was different from the recent modern-day Republican. He said what many people were thinking and willingly questioned what was being offered as the norm. Trump challenged the status quo and made the establishment of both parties uncomfortable. Ironically, for all those in the media, in the Democratic and Republican parties who thought Trump would break the GOP, it is the Democrats in disarray and exposed. They were wrong, clearly on the wrong side of history. In the end, Americans embraced what we were told they would reject and cut the cord of influence on the Obama, Clinton, Biden, and Hollywood elitist political class in favor of the MAGA movement. Not lost are the Republicans that joined the anti-Trump mob, the never-Trumpers, and even worked to get Democrats elected. Although I do not believe in spiking the football after victories, I think it is important to look at the different groups within the party who showed the true colors and taught Republican voters on who can be trusted and rejected. I do not believe the litmus test for being a Republican is loyalty to other politicians. But, I do think that politics of convenience is not something bases want from the people that ask for their vote. For instance, Mitt Romney was a staunch anti-Trumper until he needed Trump to help him pull off a Hillary Clinton-style Senate run outside of his home state. Then he was a never-Trumper again after he got what he wanted. I do think that the rhinos do have a place in the party. But they must not think that Republicans voters want to go back to the days of timid candidates who do not fight for the party ideals and the people's interests. Even when the general societal sentiment favors their positions, weak candidates lose elections. There are many rhinos that are too resentful or now feel marginalized. How can people like Liz Cheney come back to the party after campaigning for a Democrat? A person of privilege whose only real credential was being the daughter of a Republican vice president in a heavily Republican state. Many generational candidates may not be a good thing. Nepotism is generally not a good thing. And why vote for a person based on who they are born to? Some genes do not pass on. The Republican establishment has changed and they need to adapt to once again align with the voters rather than the donors. Engage voters of all backgrounds to connect Americans with the benefits associated with low taxes, safe communities, economic growth, and American exceptionalism. Republicans need to set aside the practice of apologizing for the radical accusations coming from the progressives and take the fight to them. You cannot appease the woke mob that will never accept your apology. Confront them and show them that they are wrong.
My name is Jennifer. I agree that there are no perfect political party or political candidate in America or any society for that matter. But the most effective candidates are the ones that listen to the people and campaign on the issues that people find important and impactful. In 2024, the election came down to the economy, illegal immigration, and safety. The same three issues at the beginning of the race were still as strong when voters arrived to cast ballots showing who really was the better aligned candidate. The real reason was that Kamala Harris was running on the inherited record of Joe Biden, who really did not have many accomplishments or any semblance of success during his time in office. Instead of stepping aside, Biden won the nomination again without really doing anything. Once the coast was clear, he simply dumped his baggage on the next sucker, who was right by his side the whole time. Since all the issues she inherited were negative, Harris wanted to make the argument around democracy threats, the DEM's projection of Trump's character, and abortion. Americans were telling the politicians that they wanted inflation addressed, our communities safer, our border secured, and less war, and you want them to hear stories about threats to democracy that may occur that did not occur the last time around. At the heart of any democracy is listening to the people and hearing their issues. The problem with people who spend a great deal of their time in power censoring society and telling people what they should think and believe is that they are unable to listen. For Republicans, it is easy to spike the football because the red wave finally happened. But a cautionary tale should be that it could be squandered if they too fail to listen and deliver on their promises and the voters' interests. We know Democrats have no intentions of changing direction. They are in the midst of doubling down on the ideas and practices that led them to this outcome. Republicans should be careful not to join them.
A big thank you to the audience for experiencing this podcast. The Christopher Peter Review is made up of this podcast as well as the series by Christopher Peter. Please continue to visit www.crcreview.com for more. Or subscribe on YouTube or YouTube Music. Thank you again and talk to you next time.